top of your head. But we are live. So, ladies and gentlemen, we talk behind the scenes. So, while Egypt adjusts his camera, welcome, welcome, welcome. Shalom, everyone, to a live episode of Race Matters. We are back. We are back live on Race Matters. We had a couple of weeks hiatus, very needed hiatus where we got some rest and did some other things, but we are back live and we missed you all. Hopefully, you missed us, but we have another great live episode of Race Matters tonight where we are talking about race and identity and how race shapes our identities. And I don't really think that people are aware of how race, in my opinion, affects everyone, regardless what race we identify as. It affects us all. And for reasons that I think that it can't not affect us all. So we're going to get into that dialogue tonight. But I just want to thank my co-hosts for joining me this evening. Thank you, Mariana. Thank you, Egypt. Good to see you both this evening. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm tired, but I'm here.
I feel the same sentiment. I'm definitely tired, but absolutely happy to be here.
All right. And we missed Rosie in her absence, and we pray that all is well with her and her family. So before we get into the heart of the matter, subscribe to the channel, like the Facebook page, and also, too, please like the video, share the video feed, all that good stuff. Click the notification bell so you'll be notified whenever we are on. And Race Matters is on every Wednesday at 8 p.m. So let's talk about race and identity. So I'm going to and Mariana is going to do this when she shares some information, but I'm going to give a definition from Wondria. I'm probably not even pronouncing that right. Wondriumdaily.com. So that's www.wondriumdaily.com. It's a quick Google search and you can find wondrium.com. And so they have many great articles on that site. And so I'm going to give you the definition that they have of identity that, is similar to definitions that I've seen elsewhere, as well as race. So for identity, they say identity is simply defined as the characteristics determining who or what a person or thing is. So the elements or characteristics of identity would include race, ethnicity, gender, age, sexual orientation, physical attributes, personality, political affiliations, religious beliefs, professional identities, and so on. So that includes a lot. And that makes up who we are, who we identify, that creates who I identify as, that creates our identity. And so they define race as a classification system used to categorize humans into large and distinct populations or groups by anatomical, cultural, ethnic, genetic, geographical, historical, linguistic, religious, or social affiliation. And they say that's a mouthful, and it really is. So essentially, they say it's the attempt to categorize or to sort people into categories based on their skin color and based on a very small set of physical characteristics. So that is how they define identity and how they define race. So let's talk about how race shapes the African American identity in the different systems, some of that are oppressive, right, in American society, which could be the education system, the penal system, the economic system, housing system, religious systems, entertainment, media, government, family, and on and on and on. All of these systems affect how African Americans see themselves, how we identify ourselves. But I don't think it's just African Americans. I think these systems affect us all. It may affect some in more of a negative way and some more in a positive way, I think is the difference. All right. And so some of these systems, as we've talked about many times on this platform, are racist, are discriminatory, are oppressive for African Americans. And so, therefore, it shapes our identity or can shape our identity in a negative way. All right, so let's discuss African Americans' identity being shaped by those different systems, some of them oppressive and racist and discriminatory, as well as how it shapes others' identities that might not be African American. But they could be Caucasian, they could be other people of color. So let's have that dialogue starting off with African Americans. So, if we go back to, slavery, even let's say, I am a Christian. And so in slavery days, Christianity was weaponized to keep Black people in a certain place, right? And to believe certain things about Christianity, about Jesus, that really weren't true. They weaponized it and took certain aspects of scripture out of context, and basically, put it in my phraseology, beat the slaves over the head with it, and to subjugate them, and to say that this is what God's will was. Okay, so that's one way that religion was used in an oppressive manner to allow a certain group of people, and in this instance, African American slaves, right? Well, first African, and then of course, then children came, right? African American slaves, and then there we go. So now that I think that is one of the big reasons for the divide in many people of African descent, African Americans, when they talk about Christianity and talk about it being a white man's religion, because of how the white man used it, weaponized it, and that was not God's intent at all. He misused it for his purposes of economic purposes and to enslave. Right, so it was used as a weapon. So
I think there's so many layers to identity and race. So
there are many layers.
So to try to narrow it, to be able to articulate how race influences people's identity, I think that when you have a scope of what identity actually is, especially in 2022, where there are people that identify as African American that don't share the same melanated skin that I have, or there might be someone who was born a male who identifies as a woman but doesn't have the attributes as a woman. So to get into the idea of identity in itself is definitely one that is I'll say a tricky conversation.
Complicated.
Right, complicated, but I also think that when it comes to race, it has to have some form of boundary, because some things that you may be able to empathize with, you can't really understand and sympathize with, because it's not your reality, no matter how much you may think that you're a part of a certain economic or racial group.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
to go back to the idea of race, in this concept that you were speaking on when it comes to religion and the past Christianity outlook on race and how it affected our mentality and how it's shaped us where we're at now, I think that it is very important to acknowledge that for me personally, when people ask, what am I will always say, I'm an American African. I don't necessarily say African American. And I know that does upset some people, or may seemingly so be offensive to some who cherish the country in which we live, that has certain abilities that other countries don't. However, I recognize that I was born in America, yes, but my melanated skin derives from the continent of Africa, thus giving me the ability to say that I'm an American African. I live in America, but who I am as an individual, the physical attributes that I possess, as well as my melanated skin that I possess, derives from the continent of Africa, because it was close to the equator. People may have traveled and moved up north, so they developed different features, but I know that I derive from that continent. So because of that, I consider myself an American African. That's number one. Number two, the media tends to shape many people's perspective on what it means to be of a Black background, or American African, African American, whatever you decide to call yourself. And that in itself is an issue because now you're talking about a system that is not controlled
Right.
by those people that give the perspective of other people.
Right.
So now you go to Britain or you go to China and they think that the American African is all rappers and they all do this and that, but that's just a small,
Mm-hmm.
like a small numerical number of people that are like that. So I think it's very important to understand that the media has the power to contradict or make contrary to what we actually are. And then in itself, we start to identify with it because we think that is the norm because it's been portrayed over and over and over again. And then other countries think the same thing of us because the media continues to put out
Mm-hmm.
photographs and videos of us killing each other. And I'm not saying that it's not a reality in some regard, but at the same time, that is not the mass majority of us. And I think that we need to start highlighting the positive blackness too, to showcase that is black too. That is black as well.
Absolutely. And, that's an age-old issue, Egypt, as well as, we know the media has always had that level of control. So right now it might be, people thinking black people are, since they say the inception of, say, hip hop and rap, they're all rappers. Well, back in the day, before that even existed, you still are, but before rap came about, we were criminals. We lived in the ghetto. All the imagery of the shows that were on, we were poor, we were maids, we were, people who, I can't, the word is escaping me, that I want to say for what we did for a living, but it was the more menial tasks of life, right? Were the only professions that we could get. And that's what we saw on television. So it shaped our identity as well as shaped the identity of those who were watching and those around the world of that's who Black people are, at least in America anyway. When we know that those of us who are Black, we have many professions, doctors, lawyers, everything, right? Back then and until now. So it's evolved now to, now we're rappers. And then, in another century, we'll be something else more, not on the side of life that you and I know as Black people, right?
Yeah.
So the media has a lot of control.
So,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I guess my thought process is when will us as a race, as a culture, come together to be able to, for us to dictate what the perspective or the perception of Black people are? I think it's time for us to find a way to monetize the media and make a way where we could actually highlight the great attributes that people of color have and showcase it at a level that is at its height. When you think about even if you look at the foundation of what America is and how it came to be, you can't talk about that without talking about what Black people have done within this country. And
absolutely,
until we get a chance to be able to show ourselves with our own representation, that's in the music industry, that's in the movie film and film industry, and the disproportionate of Black people that they show getting arrested but not actually getting going to trial and actually being found guilty. But yeah, now when you see it, this is your perspective that these people did it and this is all they look like.
right?
It's going to be a perspective of us that is unbecoming. So it is up to us to start taking ownership of these networks so that when people do see us, they see us in a light that we project and we portray, and not the ones that are cultivated by people that don't look like us.
Absolutely. But if we look at the media now in the film industry and Egypt, you're in that industry. Look at all the Black film directors and actors, et cetera, composers that we have now that are coming to light. I mean, we've always been around, but we haven't, been able to get into those positions. But we're breaking glass ceilings now, right? Because before, we wouldn't have African American directors, et cetera, and putting out a Tyler Perry's owning his own studio, et cetera. So we have come a long way. Do we have a long way to go? Absolutely. But we have made inroads. And let me just say this, something that I think, Egypt, you might be overlooking. You are sitting on the panel as a host, right, of Full Life Communication. This is a media company, a broadcasting media company. Yeah, many people don't know us right now, right? But oh, baby, give it a second, right? I don't even say in a minute. Give it a second, because God has a plan. This is his brainchild. This is not Sharon's brainchild. And it's for a purpose to dominate the mountain of media. You know, there's 7 mountains of society that God created, and the media is one. And Full Life Communications is supposed to be at the top of that mountain, right? We already are, it's just that people don't know us. But when the full manifestation, right, comes, you are a part of that.
Absolutely.
Right. And Mariana is a part of that. And Rosie is a part of that, and all the other shows that I do. And so now with Full Life Communications, we will show forth who we as Black people really are. Right. You are in law school. So let's say basically you're a lawyer, right? I'm in private practice as a mental health clinician, about to be a doctor. We are already showing them that we don't fit the stereotype.
Right.
Right. So let's not downplay who you really are and what you are already doing and where you already sit by to change that narrative. You've already doing it, and you've been doing it, because this is not your first time. You just started doing it on radio, right? So we're already doing it. So let's not forget that we're already changing the narrative.
So the media can be used for good, not just to continue stereotypes.
Absolutely. We're proof of it.
I have a question for you, Mariana. Were you born in America?
No, I was a teenager, so I got to experience still quite a bit.
So I guess my question comes into, what is the perspective of Black people in where you're from?
Right, that's a good question. On one hand, like prior, I think, to more access to American television, we didn't have a lot of knowledge about people from Africa or African Americans, because I grew in a really small town in Moldova, and like it was very rare for us to see a person of color. I think in my entire life, maybe I saw 2-3 people before I moved to the US. So it was just like not common. And a few of the experiences that I had, I think I diverse, because on one hand, when we did meet people, there was a level of like curiosity, and they looked different. And yet, even in our country, I think there was levels of discrimination that were based on skin color. And in our cases were like the gypsies, which were a bit darker complexity, because I think they originate in India. So they did face discrimination. My country of Moldova and Romania as well. And then, even blue eyes and blonde hair were viewed as like, more beautiful than like darker hair and darker eye color and such. So there was absolutely levels of, ranking people based on their skin color and eye shapes.
I'm glad that you said that, because obviously my perspective is only in America. However, I was in Africa for like a month, and I remember telling them, "Yeah, I'm an American African. Like, my people are," and they were like, "No, bro, you are American. That's it. They don't even see you as an American. They see you as an American. That's it.
That's it."
And in my mind, I want to be like, fortunately for your ancestors, they didn't get taken away from this land. I don't necessarily, when you talk about identity, I don't have a place to call home. I don't have a place to say, I'm from Morocco, I'm from Cairo, I'm from Liberia. I know I live in America. I know that my ancestors were here and brought here because of the skin complexion that I have, but I don't know what's home except for the fact that I was brought here. Some people are able to say I'm German, I'm Irish. I have no idea, because they didn't take a list of, oh, well, we got these slaves from the Fowler plantation from, I don't know, Sierra Leone. So now I know, well, the Fowlers were, I don't know. So not having that identity, but wanting to be able to place identity within myself to say that I'm from this country in Africa, it kind of like messes with you in that regard too. Because I feel like I'm not accepted. I'm accepted here. I'm not appreciated. I want to go to a place where I feel not only accepted but appreciated for who I am and the melanated skin that I possess, so that I can grow into the person that I could be without having anybody telling me where my ceiling could be at.
Yeah.
I'm here to
No.
tell you that you don't have a ceiling. And I know I'm not the person that you're talking about, but I'm going to tell you that you don't have a ceiling, because God is in control and he doesn't have a barrier for you. You know, we can't allow man to put barriers on us, because we
Right.
remain just as flawed as I am. So who are you to tell me what I can do? You can't. Right. So I don't have any barriers, because God doesn't have any barriers on me, and he created me, and he's the only one I listen to in that regard. So take the barriers off yourself. Don't allow other people to dictate to you what you can do and who you are. And I know you don't do this to a certain degree, but I'm just speaking here to what you were just saying. It's like, you know, what you can do and who you are, who you want to be, is boundless. It's endless, because you have God in you. And that's just like, what? Right? You can't do anything with me because of that. Right? That's my respect.
Take that away from you, right? And this is a good time to highlight too that, you know, the definition of race is a social construct.
That's right.
We know, like, biologically, the differences are not strong enough to determine, you know, that the basis is objective, right, and it's not set in a level of ranking, as Sharon shared when she read some of those definitions. And I think the emphasis, even in the names, right, to me highlight a level of opposing people in different distinct groups. Because, you know, if we were to talk about colors, right, I'm trying to find something white here, right, there you go. Like, my skin doesn't look like this, right?
Right.
That's white.
Right. And my skin doesn't look like this, and this is black. Right?
Right.
But, and it seems like whoever, like, was intentional about naming those two different things was almost like wanting to emphasize the differences between us.
Absolutely. I think they wanted to make, so like when you think about black and white on its face, when it comes to the color, outside of the actual diaspora people that you derive from, black always has a negative connotation.
Right, that too. Yeah.
So when you say this person is black and this person is white, the assumption in your mind, without even saying or knowing anything, is, oh, one person is on the negative side and the other person is on the positive side.
Right. And like white has been associated with, like, purity, right? Like the bride in Christianity, brides wearing white signify purity and all of these other things. And exactly, you know, I think a lot of this has been intentionally used to excuse, right, the choices of white people towards people of color, because if we can name them as less than somehow, right, we excuse ourselves from the responsibility of why we're doing what we're doing.
Exactly. And we know a lot of it, you know, is economic, because therefore, if I can subjugate you in that way, and we take slavery, etc. But even, you know, modern forms of slavery in the penal system, etc. Right? Because there's also too not just a physical enslavement. There's a mental enslavement that happens when we allow this construct of white supremacy to reign. Right? It makes us feel a certain way about ourselves, and I'm talking about not just Black people, everyone. Some people have a superior, you know, a feeling about themselves because of how a white supremacist society is laid out, right? And then some people feel inferior about themselves because that's what it's meant to do. It's really insidious. You know, when you really look at it, you know, and study it. I'm sorry, EJ, what did you say?
I just have a question for you, and this is, I guess, me playing devil's advocate, because this is what I've heard in the past from some of my friends who I'm able to have this open dialogue with. Do you think that Black people or people of color have the ability to be racist as well?
Not with the actual definition of racism.
Yeah. That would require, right, going back 400 plus years, right? Enslaving white people for a few, hundreds of years, then ongoing, limiting them from access to resources, stealing from them, all of those things. And then we can say, right, that
Right.
Absolutely.
people are racist. Yeah.
Because
That
it's a
that was
position of power,
Mhm.
right? We don't have that power. So technically, we can't be racist. We're not the oppressor. The oppressor is the racist,
Mhm.
right? So we throw that word around saying, "Oh yeah, well you're a racist talking about a black person. You're a racist against me." But we throw the word around, but we're misusing it when we
yeah,
use it in that context because
Right.
black people can't be racist.
Mhm.
right. I just wanted to ask that, and I wanted that to be elaborated because I think oftentimes when we get into these conversations, it could be skewed as we don't like white people, or we have this just innate reasoning to not speak profoundly on some of the people that aren't like that. Well, all white people aren't like that. And I wanted to be clear that I'm not saying that there's not good white people. I'm saying that we live in a social construct that doesn't
Right.
allow equity, not just equality, but equity
Mhm.
for everybody to have an even chance and an equal playing ground to succeed, and to tell people that they have an equal playing ground and expect them to be able to succeed in a society that is not like that is just unfair and unjust. And I think that the
Mhm.
system has to change. But the only way it will change is if people that look like you and I are able to get into these spaces, and then not only get into these spaces, but not be controlled by those who are overseers of these spaces to change the narrative.
Mhm.
Because
Right.
I think a lot of times there are people that of color or black that do get a chance to get in these spaces, but then they get talked to in a way that changes what their intentions was when they first got in these spaces. I'm gonna change it. Then when they get in there, be like, you know what? It's just me. I'm one person. I kind of gotta abide by the rules. Like, this is my job now. I don't want to. I can't lose my job, and it
Mhm.
kind of changes the purpose as to why they even got into it in the first place.
And you know what's key there, Egypt? Ownership. Like with Tyler Perry, you can't tell him anything. He owns everything that he does, right? Because he created his own. He didn't go to Hollywood to be cast or to be whatever. He created his own from the bottom up, and he casted people. He was the director, he was the producer, he was the writer, and now he owns his own production company. So he makes the rules. So when we own like Full Life Communications, we are not coming up under anyone. I make the rules. So I don't have to kowtow to anyone's a system. I can say what I want freely now to a certain extent because to actually just to start this off, well, I'm on YouTube and Facebook. So there are rules, right, that I still have to follow on these platforms, right? So, but that's just a minute too, because this is a stepping stone to not be on anyone's platform but just my own. So
Mhm.
there's still rules that we have to follow on here, but it's not like the Hollywoods of the world. There's much more latitude, and freedom on social media with what we want to do and say, etc. Than say the roles we might get to be cast in Hollywood, right? Or our vision to come forth from a Hollywood film or whatever, because there's so much political minutia, to go through and hoops to jump over, and it's exhausting. You were
Right.
in that world, you
Yeah.
know.
I mean, I got to see a little bit of that just seeing what happened with the new Little Mermaid being.
Yes,
And even with that, like
every
obviously
time.
social media went into like a frenzy. Oh, Little Mermaid is black. She should never have been black. There was one comment that I'm like, that was a fair statement. I did see someone say like having Little Mermaid be a ginger, and gingers aren't always publicly recognized and are highlighted in these films. I can understand why there needs to be representation of people that have ginger hair. I can kind of see where you were going with that, but that's it's in the movie. She had ginger hair, so it ain't like they changed the hair. And then also, not to mention the fact that somebody said, and this was funny, if you read the Bible and they talk about what Christ looks like, you're being rude for a rude awakening.
Right.
if this is how you feel about Little Mermaid,
Right, right.
you're going to be in for a rude awakening when you find out what Christ looks like.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, to me, if you feel so strongly about this, you also have to look at Aladdin. Aladdin was casted with people that weren't of Indian descent. You also have to look at when they had casted the Egyptian movie and had Cleopatra. She was a white woman.
Right.
Exactly.
All these people of color, many times these white people were used in film over the years.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
and the mermaid is a fictional character. So it's not even a real character that you can say, oh, well, this person was white. Why are you making it black? It's fictional. It can be any color you want. It can be purple. It doesn't matter.
A fish can be any color.
Right. But that's how deep these roots are of racism, right?
Right.
Which is what we're talking about.
It really shows that, yeah. And as you're, talking about identity, Egypt, and the fact that there is really no place where you can say, like, I come from this place specifically and identify with that. Then I'm curious for both of you, and I know your family, so you can both answer. But, like, what do you think have been some of the major factors that play a role in your identity?
I can, I guess, speak for me. I think that's in part why we kind of take sports so serious and stuff like that, because it gives us stuff to identify with. So, for instance, for me, I know I was born in Philly. So I'm like, oh, I'm an Eagles fan. What? You talk about the Eagles, I want to fight, because it gives me that sense of identity and that pride, because that's where I'm from. And that team plays in the city that I was born in. So naturally, I feel more compelled to identify with that, because I know where they play at. You don't know, like, if I go to Indianapolis, I don't know where they play at. I just know that their team is the Colts. You got to take me there. I got to call. I know how to drive to that place. I know where to get the best cheesesteak from. I know what the food's going to taste like. So I think that, like, the first thing is, like, I'm like, okay, my family is from Philly. Granted, my grandfather is from New York. My grandmother, she's from South Carolina. Like, so there are some differences, right? But I know that my family is rooted, and when I was born, Philly. So there is some identification in that, and I think that some of it comes from, like, it's easier to identify with the city than it is for me to identify with the country that doesn't respect me or appreciate me. And it's easier to identify with the city because I know it and I understand it. Versus this, I don't know it or understand it. Even though I live in it, I also know that there's not a system that works for me. It's a system that works against me. I think another thing for me that helps with my identity is I put who I am and the man that I am on the people that raised me. And that's my father, my mother, my grandparents. And because of who they are, that's where my identity lies when I can't figure out where I'm from. I just look at, oh, this is my last name. This is who I'm, even though the last name comes from a place where I don't agree with. The reason why I haven't changed it is because the people that have made me the man that I am today are where that name stops and starts at. And I think that in itself is another place in which my identity comes from that allows me to be comfortable with who I am in this current state, in the current place that I'm at. Because I take that with me wherever I go. It don't matter if I'm Africa, if I'm in Germany, this is who I am because this is where I was raised. This is who raised me. And that is going to always carry with me no matter where I'm at.
Yeah, I think after sharing the answers, we can talk about why that is important, right? Having that identity, stemming from somewhere.
For me, it's my parents, the people who raised me, and of course, every aspect of society affects our identity. Again, as I said in the beginning of the show, it can't not affect you. Different experiences that we have culturally, economically, etc., have a part to play. But I've never been one to allow things to stick to me that I thought, even from an early age, that I just thought, and I didn't know what it was then, but now that I know that I have this walk with the Lord, that it was God who shaped my identity and shielded me from things, right? So I went to PWIs my entire life, except from elementary school. And from 7th grade on, I went to private school, and then PWIs throughout college, and still go to one. and being in I can't really think of not one of a few, if not the only Black person in every class. And seeing myself thrive in all of those arenas, right? Even ones that I'm supposed to not be in, but seeing myself thrive in all of them allowed me to know that I have no bounds. I have no limits. I am sitting in places where I'm not accepted, and I am thriving and thriving above them. Right. And so it showed me that I am not held back. So I didn't place strings, attachments on me that I couldn't, because I always saw myself as equal to, regardless of what may have been said. Now, maybe if I didn't thrive in those environments, I may have thought of myself less than, but I thrived in those environments that I wasn't supposed to be in.
Right.
So I never saw myself with limits. So
that I think, and again, these are the things that need to be showcased. Like, people don't understand what these thought processes that we have to go through on a daily basis. You go into a world where you're Sharon, where you're in a PWI, which is a predominantly white institution, where you may be looked at, you are the minority, but then you may be looked at as inferior, but yet you're expect to answer questions at the same level. I talk about this all the time. There's the education system in the city of Philadelphia isn't the same depending on what school you go to. And there's some schools that have majority Black people or Hispanic people that go to these schools. They don't even have textbooks.
Right.
They don't even have computers to get on. But then you go to the school up the street that has predominantly white students, and they have textbooks, they have iPads, they have MacBooks. And it's unfortunate because then you tell these students they have to take the same exam. Everybody has to take their SATs. Everybody has to get into college if they're going to go to college. How do you expect a student that doesn't have textbooks, that doesn't have an iPad or a laptop, to be able to get into the same or get the same access into these institutions of higher learning to go to college, but have less resources? But yet you tell them that they have the same opportunity as the next person. That's
but
just
they
not
don't.
fair.
It's not fair, yeah.
And that's where you talked about the equity. There is none. Right?
Equality and equity are two different things.
Can you share more about that? And I know we talked about this, but I don't know if like some of the listeners will understand the difference. So each if they want, if you can tell us more.
Oh, absolutely. So the difference, and I've seen like this was on one of the social media platforms, and it was like the best depiction possible. The difference between equity and equality would be if we all were trying to watch a baseball game and there was a fence, and I'm shorter than you, Sharon's taller than me, and we all are trying to watch the baseball game, but there's a fence in the way. Equality would be to give us all the same height box and tell us to stand on the box because we all got the same box. So now that was equality. They equally gave us all the same thing. Equity would be to say, I know that you are naturally taller. Sharon is in between me, you, and I'm the shortest. Give them a box that allows them to be at the same eye level. So by them being at the same eye level, they're able to comprehend the game at the same eye level as everybody else. And now you can't say I didn't have the same opportunity to see it. I saw the game differently. Now your perspective may be different,
right?
But your opportunity to get the same chance to see it the same way, is even.
And what we have. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, and I finished with that.
No, I think it's important to distinguish the difference in today's society, because telling people asking for equality isn't enough. Asking for equity is necessary for people that are in positions that are less than need to be able to progress. But they don't want the playing field to be even, because the moment that the playing field is even, they may see a decline on their level of power. Absolutely. And I don't think that anybody, and I mean this, anybody who is at a level of power would intentionally do something for their power to shift, even if that meant giving giving equity to everybody, so that it could potentially shift. Nobody would intentionally want that pendulum to switch.
And there isn't even equality, let alone equity. There isn't even equality. Yeah, that's an ideal. that we haven't lived up to.
Equity is reversed here, right? Because on one hand, we know about racial trauma passed through generations and the impact of that, right? So not only are a lot of these kids in urban neighborhoods experiencing like other traumas, right?
Mm-hmm.
That makes it hard for them to maybe even come and learn, even if the resources were there. But like they don't have the resources either, right? So it's almost as if like we took from the shortest person the literature and gave it to the tallest and said, here, like that's kind of what it is like. Not only are some of these factors that lasted generations impacted people of color here, but we continue to take from them and give to others.
Right. Mariano, since your teenage years living in America, and this is because of maybe a general question, as it relates to race and identity and your experience here in America, what has been like if you just had to have an overarching thought as someone who moved here from another country, and if you had to if you had to say like America, and this race issue, what does someone coming in, so someone such as yourself coming in and living here for, quite a few years now, what's your take on it?
Mm-hmm. Oof.
I know, right? I know.
You're going there. No, I don't mind being honest, but I'm hesitating because a large part of that will also include me being honest about the community that I was a part of, that was an immigrant community, and it was not white American, but it was white evangelical, and then it was an ethnic group, right? That was Eastern European, so some were like Moldovan churches, there's some Romanian, I'm familiar with some Ukrainian churches in the area that might have even some Moldovians, because Moldovians and Ukrainians also speak Russian, so sometimes you'll see churches where they're in Russian, but you have ethnic Ukrainians and Moldovians and some other nationalities there from that region of the world. And so that was for a few years my the people that I spent time with, right, at church, and then friends with the people from church. I didn't speak any English when I came here, so that really was like my community. Now, I think what was helpful in some ways for me and my siblings was that we also liked Spanish a lot, and we would watch Spanish telenovelas and learn the language. So when we went to school, we became friends with a lot of Spanish-speaking, peers, and that I think actually played a big role in helping us see things a little bit differently. But I loved that community, and a big aspect of that being their view on race. It's heartbreaking to say, but I grew up in a church that was conservative Baptist, and they think that they have like an honest view of scripture, right? They get it right, and then the things they would say about people of color was not godly in any way, shape, or form. And majority of them became Trump supporters. And of course, the reason they say that, it's because of abortion, right? That's the stuff that they like to say in theory, because it makes them look more godly. But they would spew some really ugly stuff about undocumented immigrants, and we are immigrants too. But of course, we came here legally. That's their argument, because so in Eastern Europe, there was a lot of persecution of Christians by the communists, which allowed us to become religious refugees. So all of these people, and it's several churches throughout the US, and because it's a small community, we would visit each other quite a bit. So a lot of people know each other. And part of that was also the culture back home, because in Eastern Europe, the percentage of evangelicals is very small, only 2%. The rest of the country is Orthodox, right? So because even there we were a minority, people had to affiliate with each other, right? To stay in touch and such. So they'll visit churches and they get married and such, and kind of that continued to here. So it's a fairly, thousands of people I know now from this community from all over East Coast. I haven't visited West Coast a lot, but some other people have, and have been to churches that are Eastern European and Portland and so on. So they're all over US. But in terms of like politics, it's over 90% Republican.
And one thing here, to just add this caveat, when you say 90% Republican, the Republican Party has changed. Both parties. Listen, this is America. You know what I mean? So both parties have issues, right? But the Republican Party has changed in recent years, and so they fractured because it's now this extremism. So that divide also too makes a difference, because again, we don't want to paint everybody with a broad brush, because again, we know that that's not an honest take, but we understand what you're saying.
I think that the reason as to why the people that you were with had the perspective or the perception of people of color, as much as I would like to be upset with them because it's not godly, I don't know if it's their fault because of what the media portrays that they were taking in. I think that even Black people oftentimes have their own perspective of their own people that can be skewed by the media. And because of that, it is hard for me to, one, just be disappointed or upset at one group of people when I know that there are Black people that look at Black people and be like, oh, they might see a group of Black men and walk across the street simply because of what they think may happen to them because they are just in a group setting and they are of color. And are there some groups of Black people that do make it difficult? And yes, there absolutely is, but there's also white people that do it.
Exactly, and we don't attach the skin color to other groups of people.
Exactly.
So I think it's truly important, and this goes back to the basis of this entire conversation, is for people of color, people of a different race, to create their own depiction of what their race is, what their race means to them, and who they are and how they operate. Because when you have people of power dictating what that looks like, they will continuously make it a negative connotation so that you can never rise to a level in which they are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And relationship is what kills all of that. If just say, like for us in Egypt, I'm not saying this is your experience, but just say, if there's some Black people who we know might think, oh, white people are the devil, right? You've heard that saying, right? White people are the enemy. Now, if I have a relationship with a white peer, a friend, as I do, because, I grew up with white people in white institutions, right? So I'm not going to believe that concept about all white people. So the same thing with white people who say, from the media perspective, see, Black people are criminals and all of this. But if you have a Black friend,
absolutely,
right, who doesn't fit that mold, now it's like, well, I'm not going to believe that what this media is telling me, because I know someone who is Black. But what we do is we're so segregated, right, into our own communities, and we don't develop relationships with people outside of our communities. So then we believe the hype, so to speak.
Exactly, and that's why which is why segregation was so powerful, right? It benefits someone to prevent people from developing relationships with Black people, because they knew, right? You're gonna form relationships. You're gonna know that that's not the truth.
And then, God forbid, what's happening now, a Black man gets with a white woman, they get married, and they have, Black and white children. Like, that is like the end of the world. Like the heavens are coming down, and that's it. But we know that's exactly what happened, and that's part of the problem. Absolutely. Right? A
I,
big part of the problem. I'm sorry, Egypt.
and I think that one of the biggest things currently is that because we are a minority in the country and what's said to be the world, but we know that we are not the minority when it comes to the world. I think that the fear is that if we continue to multiply with people that are not Black or African American or American African, whatever you would like to consider, um, if we continue to multiply with the white race, that then the masses will even more so look more like us because the dominant trait is Black. And that will in itself start to change what the world looks like. And the fear for them will be that they will in turn lose power.
Oh, absolutely. It's called the browning of America. And that's one of the ways it's browning. The other ways is browning is immigration, right? And so that's why you hear more of a stink, if you will, about immigration when people are migrating from countries of color versus if white countries had people flooding the gates. Well, the former president even said so. I can't remember what country he said. Why don't we have immigrants coming from? And it was a white country.
Yeah.
And let me share this with you. And I saw this on social media, and unfortunately, I don't have the who said it, but it was somebody who's a politician currently now at one of their just meetings. This whole abortion issue. If we stop people from having abortions, yes, what you spoke to Egypt is true, but now if we stop people from having abortions, we stop white people from having abortions, and now we further our population. We continue our population more, right? Because again, we fear the browning of America, so we stop white people from not having babies. We gain more white people in American society.
I didn't think of it like that.
This is out of their own mouths saying this at one of their own meetings, which the media is everywhere, right? And somebody who was covering it said, see, this is the real reason for the anti-abortion movement.
Well, I hope they realize that means people of color also.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But so it's more numerically more white people in the country than there are Black people in the country. So, they're thinking numbers wise. But
right.
There's just a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And
it's about power more so than
power and money.
Just to be specific, though, it is more people that are white in America than there are people of color.
That's what I meant. America. Because we are 13.5%. When I say we,
right? No,
Black
I just
people.
for the conglomerate of that are listening. I wanted to make sure they understood that it was in America, not
in America.
Because what happens is that they try to make it the perception that there are more people that are white in the world as opposed to as opposed to just the country in itself.
Right. Yeah, and that's a falsehood. No, that's not true at all.
Yeah.
Right. But yes, I meant in America. I mean, look at how many, if you even just, people, if you just even thought about the countries that exist, you would know that whites are not the numerical majority in the world.
Exactly.
Right? But
so that's why they had to viciously take the power, because they are not the numerical majority. And had they not viciously taken it, they would not have the power that they have.
Absolutely. Well, guys, this has been a great discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, Marianne. What were you going to say?
No, I was going just to highlight the South African, right, power dynamics that happen, where white people were the minority and they still were in charge.
Right.
I mean, unfortunately, hopefully you won't lead in that direction, but sometimes the signs are kind of scary with U.S. politics because, yes, here in terms of racial dynamics, white is still the majority, but in terms of political numbers, right? We know that for a long time now, Democrats have surpassed, Republicans. And in that sense, when over the issue of abortion, right, over 60% of Americans are not against abortion legally, right? And yet they have the power to say this is what we're going to do, despite that not being the majority of the people.
That's why it's so important to vote. It's so important to vote. But on that note, this has been a great conversation, you guys. I have enjoyed this conversation so much. And this is the reason for this show, to have these types of dialogues that we don't have other places, because oftentimes we can't even have this dialogue other places. So because of the sensitive nature of it, and people getting so uptight and emotional, and just then it just becomes a downward spiral and an argument. But we don't have to argue over these things, right? We can share our opinion and we don't have to agree, but maybe we can find some common ground when we do come together and share our opinion. How about that? Because it's difficult to dislike someone you understand, right? And I'm not taking that quote myself. I don't know who it is, but I didn't make it up. So don't want to take that on, but it's difficult. It really is. When I understand you, it's like, wow, you know what? I like you. I didn't know you before, so I prejudged you, right? But now that I'm getting to know you and understand, it's like, we don't really have that many differences, because we're all the human race, right? We all love. We all have flaws. We all when we get cut, we're going to bleed. We're humans. But these other constructs, as you said, Mariana, come to divide us. But we are more alike than we are different. But the constructs come to divide us for power and control.
Exactly.
So, well, thank you guys so much for the intelligent conversation. That's what you get on Race Matters. You get an intelligent conversation, right? See, Egypt, you're raising the bar. You're already doing it. You're already putting out the image of an intelligent Black man in the media, right?
And you have created a place to make it a home. So we are probably appreciative.
Don't ever forget who you are and the impact that you are already making in the media. Just by being on this show, and when you were on the radio, you are making these inroads. Regardless of who else may be not doing what you are making these inroads. So, and it's only greater from here. So that being said, thank you so much, Egypt. Thank you, Mariana. Rosie, we miss you tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, if you watch live, watch on the replay. It doesn't matter as long as you watch. Thank you for watching. If you watch on the replay, if you have any comments or questions, please put them in the chat, because we do go back and follow up with anybody who puts anything in the chat. Please subscribe to the channel right now. Take a second to subscribe to the channel on YouTube, like the Facebook page, share the feed, and click the notification bell so you'll be notified when we're on. Race Matters is on every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. So that is our time. We thank you so much for joining us. Have a God evening. Have a God week. Shalom.